The soft whisper of rain tapped against the old and wooden window panes as Clara lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The faint glow of her bedside lamp cast shadows across her cozy attic room, but tonight sleep refused to visit her. The dreams had been coming every night, vivid, strange, and haunting. No matter how hard she tried, their meaning eluded her, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. Her small room was cluttered with books and trinkets she'd collected from antique shops and yard sales. Clara had always been fascinated by the mysterious and the magical. Her favorite find was a dusty old book titled The Language of Dreams, which now lay on her nightstand. Despite reading it cover to cover, she still couldn't make sense of the strange images her mind conjured each night. The rain grew heavier, drumming a soothing rhythm, and Clara finally felt her eyelids grow heavy. Just as she began to drift off, a peculiar sound startled her, a faint chime like the tinkling of glass bells. She sat up, her heart pounding, and listened closely. The sound came again, clearer this time, as if it were calling to her. Clara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and crept toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw a faint silvery glow emanating from the direction of the woods at the edge of her backyard. It pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. She hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. Grabbing a flashlight, she slipped on her boots and coat and stepped out into the rain. The air was cool and crisp, and the scent of wet earth filled her lungs. Clara followed the glowing light, her boots squelching softly in the muddy grass. The woods seemed alive, whispering secrets as the wind rustled the leaves. The further she ventured, the brighter the light became, guiding her deeper into the forest until she reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered table, its surface covered in moss. Atop the table sat a crystal ball, glowing faintly with a silvery blue light. The chime she had heard earlier rang softly in the air, though there was no breeze to stir it. Clara approached the table cautiously, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The crystal ball was mesmerizing. It seemed to hum with energy, and as Clara peered into its depths, she saw swirling colors and shapes that shifted like clouds in a stormy sky. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface. The moment she touched it, a jolt of warmth shot up her arm, and the world around her blurred. When her vision cleared, Clara found herself standing in a vast, dreamlike landscape. The air shimmered with hues of gold and violet, and the ground beneath her feet felt soft, like walking on clouds. Towering trees with glowing leaves surrounded her, their branches stretching toward a sky filled with stars that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Welcome, dreamer," a gentle voice said beside her. Clara turned to see an old woman draped in a flowing silver cloak. Her eyes sparkled like the crystal ball, and her hair seemed to shimmer with starlight. In her hand, she held a staff topped with a small crystal orb that mirrored the one on the table. "Who are you?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am Selena, keeper of dreams," the woman replied. "You have been called here because your dreams seek meaning, and you have the courage to seek their truth." Clara blinked, unsure if she was awake or still dreaming. "My dreams, they've been so strange lately. They feel important, but I don't understand them." Selena smiled gently. "Dreams are the threads that connect your waking world to the unseen realms of the soul. Each dream holds a message, but it takes wisdom and courage to interpret them. That is why the crystal spear has chosen you." "The crystal spear?" Clara asked, glancing around. "The ball you touch is no ordinary object," Selena explained. "It is a doorway, a guide, and a keeper of secrets. Through it, you can uncover the meanings hidden within your dreams." Clara looked down at her hands, still tingling from the warmth of the spear. "But why me? I'm no one special." "Every dreamer is special," Selena said, "but not all are willing to listen. The sphere calls to those who are ready to embark on the journey of understanding. You have the heart of a seeker, Clara. Before Clara could respond, Selena waved her staff, and the shimmering landscape around them shifted. Images began to form in the air, fragments of Clara's recent dreams. She saw the strange golden door she had dreamed of the night before, its intricate carvings glowing faintly. She saw the towering figure cloaked in shadow that had both frightened and intrigued her. And she saw the endless staircase spiraling upward into the clouds. "These are your dreams," Selena said. "Each image holds a piece of the puzzle. The crystal sphere will help you uncover their meaning, but you must be patient and open to what it reveals." Clara stepped closer to the glowing images, her heart racing. "But how do I start? How do I know what they mean?" "The first step," Selena said, "is to trust your intuition. Dreams speak in symbols, and their meanings are often personal. The sphere will guide you, but you also must trust yourself." Selena reached out and placed her hand on Clara's shoulder. "Remember, understanding your dreams is not just about interpreting symbols. It is a journey into your own soul. The answers you seek may surprise you, but they will always lead you closer to your true self." Clara nodded, though she still felt unsure. The idea of exploring her dreams in such a profound way both excited and frightened her. "Now," Selena said, her voice softening, "it is time for you to return. When you wake, the sphere will remain with you. Keep it close, and it will continue to guide you." Before Clara could ask more questions, the shimmering landscape began to fade, and she felt herself being pulled back toward the waking world. The last thing she saw was Selena's kind smile and the glowing light of the sphere. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in her attic room, the rain still tapping against the window. On her nightstand, where her book had been, sat the crystal sphere, its silvery glow soft and inviting. She reached out and touched it, feeling the same warmth as before. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. The journey to understand her dreams had only just begun, but Clara knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone in the mystery. As she drifted back to sleep, the sphere pulsed gently, and her dreams began to unfold like a story waiting to be told. The morning sunlight filtered through the attic window, warming the wooden floor and casting a golden glow over the small room. Clara sat cross-legged on her bed, the crystal sphere resting on her lap. Its silvery light had dimmed in the daylight, but it still held a faint shimmer as if alive with unseen energy. Clara's heart was racing. The events of the night before felt like a dream themselves, but the sphere's presence confirmed they were real. She reached out and ran her fingers over its smooth surface, feeling the same subtle warmth as before. The questions swirling in her mind were endless, but one image lingered above all others: the golden door. The dream of the door had been reoccurring for weeks. Each time she found herself standing before it, mesmerized by its intricate carvings of swirling patterns and symbols that seemed to shift and moved when she wasn't looking. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never open it. The door remained locked, and Clara always woke before she could find the key. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, resting her hands on the sphere. "What does it mean?" she whispered, as if the sphere could hear her. To her surprise, the sphere began to glow brighter, its light swirling like liquid silver. Clara's heart skipped a beat. The patterns within the sphere shifted, forming a vision. A shimmering image of the golden door appeared within its depths. The door seemed even more vivid now, the carvings alive with light. Clara stared into the sphere, transfixed, as a soft voice echoed in her mind. It wasn't Selena's voice, but something gentler, like the whisper of a breeze. "The door represents a choice," the voice said. "It stands between you and what lies within, a truth you must uncover." Clara's brow furrowed. "But why can't I open it? What's behind it?" The voice didn't answer directly. Inside, the sphere's glow intensified, and Clara felt a strange pull, as though it were drawing her into its depths. Before she could resist, the world around her shifted, and she found herself standing in the dreamscape once again. The golden door loomed before her, its surface glowing softly in the otherworldly light of the dream realm. Clara stepped closer, her bare feet sinking into the soft, cloud-like ground. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cool, metallic surface of the door. The carvings seemed to ripple under her touch, and she could feel a faint hum of energy. "Why am I here again?" she asked aloud, her voice echoing in the stillness. "You are here to listen," said a familiar voice behind her. Clara turned to see Selena standing a few feet away, her silver cloak flowing like water in the gentle breeze of the dream realm. The keeper of dreams held her staff, its crystal orb glowing faintly. "The door is your threshold," Selena explained. "It marks the boundary between what you know and what you have yet to discover. To open it, you must understand its purpose." Clara looked back at the door, frustration bubbling within her. "But I don't know how. I've dreamed of it so many times, but I don't even know where to start." Selena stepped closer, her gaze soft and kind. "Dreams speak in symbols, Clara. The door may seem solid, but it is made of your thoughts, your fears, and your desires. To open it, you must face what lies within yourself." Clara's heart sank. What if I'm not ready? What if I don't like what I find? Selena smiled gently. "The truth can be daunting, but it is also freeing. Trust yourself and trust the sphere. It will guide you." With a wave of her staff, Selena summoned the crystal spear, which floated in the air between them. Its silvery light illuminated the door, casting intricate patterns across its surface. Clara watched as the sphere began to spin slowly, its glow intensifying. "Place your hand on the sphere," Selena instructed. Clara hesitated for a moment, then reached out and placed her hand on the sphere. The moment she touched it, a surge of warmth spread through her, and the golden door began to change. The carvings glowed brighter, and a soft clicking sound echoed in the stillness. "You are unlocking it," Selena said. "Each dream you explore, each truth you uncover, will bring you closer to opening this door." Clara watched in awe as the door seemed to shimmer and shift, the carvings rearranging themselves into new patterns. She could feel the energy in the air, a mix of anticipation and mystery. "But it's not fully opened," Clara said, her voice tinged with both hope and disappointment. "Not yet," Selena said. "The door will open when you are ready. Each step you take will bring you closer. For now, remember what you have seen and trust the journey." As Selena spoke, the dreamscape began to fade, and Clara felt herself being pulled back to the waking world. The last thing she saw was the golden door glowing softly, its mysteries waiting to be revealed. Clara awoke with a start, her heart racing. The sphere still sat on her lap, its light now dim but steady. She glanced at the clock. It was early morning, and the world outside was quiet. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of clarity. The door wasn't just a mystery, it was a path. And while she didn't have all the answers yet, she knew she was finally moving in the right direction. Taking a notebook from her nightstand, Clara began to write down everything she had seen and felt. The golden door, the carvings, Selena's words, all of it was important. As she wrote, the sphere glowed faintly, as if encouraging her. The journey had only just begun, but Clara was no longer afraid. The door would open when the time was right, and until then she would keep seeking, keep dreaming, and keep listening to the secrets the sphere had to reveal. The morning came slowly, with beams of golden light creeping through the cracks in Clara's attic window. She sat on the edge of her bed, the crystal sphere resting in her hands, its faint glow pulsating like a heartbeat. Though her mind still swirled with the memories of the dream realm, one thing stood out with crystal clarity. It was no longer the golden door. It was no longer just an image in her dreams. It was the challenge, a puzzle she was determined to solve. Clara ran her fingers over the sphere's smooth surface. It felt warm, almost alive, as if it held its own consciousness. She leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass, and whispered, "What do I do next?" The sphere responded, its glow intensified, and the patterns within its depths began to swirl and shift. Clara's heart raced as a new image formed, a vast library filled with towering shelves that seemed to stretch into eternity. The vision flickered for a moment, then vanished, leaving Clara staring at her reflection in the now quiet sphere. "A library," she murmured, frowning. "What does that mean?" Her eyes drifted to the dusty antique book on the nightstand, The Language of Dreams. She had flipped through its pages countless times hoping for answers, but now she felt compelled to open it again. Pulling the book into her lap, she began to skim through the worn pages, searching for anything that could explain the golden door. The book described dream symbols and their meanings. Doors often represent choices, opportunities, or barriers within the dreamer's psyche, but nothing in the book mentioned how to open them. Clara sighed, frustrated. The cryptic vision of the library lingered in her mind. Was it a real place, or another part of the dream realm? The thought barely settled before a soft chime echoed through the room, the same sound she had heard the night before. The sphere's glow returned, stronger this time, filling the small attic with a silvery light. Clara set the book aside and focused on the sphere, her pulse quickening. As she stared, a single word formed in her mind, spoken not by a voice, but by a feeling. "Seek." "Seek what?" Clara asked out loud. She felt foolish talking to the sphere, but it was the only connection she had to the answers she sought. The sphere pulsed in response, and suddenly Clara felt the familiar tug, an invisible pull that seemed to draw her into its depths. She gripped the sphere tightly as the room around her faded, replaced by the shimmering, ethereal glow of the dream realm. Clara found herself standing in the vast library from the vision. The air smelled of aged paper and ink, and the golden light of floating lanterns illuminated rows upon rows of shelves. Each shelf was crammed with books of every shape and size, their spines adorned with strange, shifting symbols. The space was impossibly large, stretching far beyond her line of sight. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly. "You are in the Hall of Knowing," a voice answered. Clara spun around to see Selina once again. The Keeper of Dreams stood at the base of a spiral staircase that wound upwards into darkness. Her silver cloak shimmered like moonlight, and the staff in her hand glowed faintly. The hall contains the knowledge of dreams. Every dreamer who has sought meaning has left their mark here. It is a place of answers, but only if you know how to ask the right question. Clara glanced at the towering shelves, feeling both awe and apprehension. "And my question is about the golden door. How do I open it?" Selina gestured for Clara to follow her. Together they walked through the labyrinth rows of bookshelves, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Clara couldn't help but run her fingers along the spines of the books as they passed. Each one seemed to hum faintly, as if alive with energy. At last they stopped before a tall, narrow shelf near the center of the hall. Selina reached out and plucked a thin, silver-bound book from the middle of the shelf. She handed it to Clara with a knowing smile. "This will guide you." Clara looked at the book in her hands. Its cover shimmered with symbols that shifted and changed like ripples on water. The title was unreadable, but as Clara opened it, the pages seemed to come alive, filling with vibrant illustrations and glowing text. "What is this?" she asked, her eyes scanning the strange, beautiful markings. "It is a reflection of your journey, Selena said. "The answers you seek are within you, Clara, but the sphere has brought you here to help you understand them. This book is yours now. It will grow with you, revealing what you need to know when the time is right." Clara nodded slowly, closing the book and holding it tightly against her chest. She felt a strange sense of comfort, as though the book was a part of her. "Thank you," she said softly. Selena placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Remember, the golden door is not just a mystery to be solved. It is a part of you. Each step you take brings you closer to unlocking it. Trust yourself and trust the sphere." Before Clara could respond, the hall of knowing began to blur and fade, the glowing lanterns dimming. The last thing she saw was Selena's kind smile as the dream realm dissolved around her. Clara woke with a start, the silver-bound book still clutched in her hands. She blinked in disbelief. The book had followed her into the waking world. Its shimmering symbols glowed faintly in the morning light, and the weight of it in her hands felt reassuring. She glanced at the crystal sphere, which now rested quietly on her nightstand. Its light had dimmed, but Clara knew it was still watching, still guiding her. With a deep breath, she opened the book to the first page. This time the symbols shifted into something she could understand, an image of the golden door with a single word beneath it. "Begin." Clara smiled. The journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt ready. The golden door awaited, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind it. The attic room felt alive with possibility as Clara studied the shimmering symbols in the silver-bound book. The single word on the page, "Begin," glowed faintly, as though it carried a quiet urgency. Clara traced the word with her finger, feeling its warmth. As she turned the page, a new image appeared, the golden door surrounded by intricate carvings of vines and stars. At the center of the page was a faint outline of a key, shimmering as if it were just out of reach. "A key," Clara murmured, leaning closer. "So that's what I need." The crystal sphere pulsed softly on her nightstand, as if affirming her thought. Clara glanced at it and smiled. "I suppose you already knew that," she said. "But where do I find it?" The book's symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Clara watched in awe as the outline of the key faded, replaced by an image of a dense forest, its trees tangled with glowing vines. A small clearing came into focus, and at its center was an ancient stone pedestal. On the pedestal lay the key, glowing faintly against the backdrop of moss and ivy. Clara's heart quickened. "The woods," she whispered. "It's in the woods." The vision faded and the page went blank. Clara closed the book and stood, determination bubbling within her. She grabbed her coat and boots, then tucked the silver-bound book into her bag. The sphere, sensing her intent, pulsed brighter, filling the room with its silvery light. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed it in her bag alongside the book. "I don't know where this is going," Clara said, "but I'm ready." The forest at the edge of her backyard felt different today. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the sunlight barely pierced the dense canopy of trees. Clara followed the narrow trail she'd walked so many times before, but now it felt like stepping into another world. Every rustle of leaves and distant bird call seemed sharper, more significant, as the forest itself was alive and watching her. The crystal sphere glowed faintly through the fabric of her bag, guiding her steps. Clara moved deeper into the woods, her eyes scanning for any sign of the clearing from the vision. Time seemed to stretch as the path twisted and turned, leading her further away from the familiar. At last Clara spotted it, a break in the trees where sunlight poured down like liquid gold. She stepped into the clearing and gasped. It was exactly as she had seen in the book. The ancient pedestal stood in the center, draped in moss and surrounded by glowing vines, and there, resting atop it, was the key. The key was unlike anything Clara had ever seen. It was larger than she expected, its surface etched with the same shifting symbols that adorned the silver-bound book. It seemed to hum faintly, as though it held its own energy. Clara stepped forward, her heart pounding. As she reached for the key, a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision. She froze, her hand hovering inches above the pedestal. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. The forest was silent. Clara scanned the tree line but saw nothing. She turned back to the pedestal and reached for the key again. This time, as her fingers closed around it, the air grew colder and the shadow reappeared, this time closer. Clara turned sharply, clutching the key to her chest. The shadow coalesced into a figure, tall and cloaked in darkness. Its form was indistinct, shifting like smoke, but its presence was undeniable. It didn't speak, but Clara felt its intent, a mixture of curiosity and warning. "What are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gripping into her chest. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it extended a shadowy hand, pointing towards the key. Clara's grip tightened instinctively. "You can't have it," she said. "I don't even know what it's for, but I know it's mine." The shadow paused, its form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Then, without warning, it stepped closer, the air growing colder with each movement. Clara stumbled back, her mind racing. She reached into her bag and pulled out the crystal sphere, holding it up like a shield. The sphere's light blazed brightly, illuminating the clearing. The shadow recoiled, hissing softly, and Clara felt a surge of courage. She stepped forward, the sphere in one hand and the key in the other. "This is my journey," she said firmly. "You can't stop me." The shadow lingered for a moment, its edges flickering like dying embers. Then, with a final hiss, it dissolved into the air, leaving the clearing silent once more. Clara exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she lowered the sphere. Its glow softened, returning to its usual gentle light. She looked down at the key, its symbols shimmering faintly in the sunlight. It felt heavy in her hand, but not in an unwelcome way. It was a weight she was ready to carry. Back in her attic room, Clara placed the key on her desk beside the crystal sphere and the silver-bound book. The three objects seemed to pulse faintly, as if connected by an invisible thread. She sat down and opened the book, curious to see if it would reveal anything new. The page where the key had first appeared now showed the golden door again, but this time the key was inserted into its lock. Beneath the image were three words glowing softly: "Face the shadow." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The shadow in the woods hadn't been an accident. It was part of her journey. The thought both terrified and intrigued her. What was the shadow, and what did it want? She glanced at the crystal sphere, which pulsed gently in the quiet room. Whatever the shadow was, Clara knew one thing for certain: she would face it. The golden door was waiting, and the key was in her hands. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to take the next step. Night had fallen, and Clara's attic room was bathed in the cool, silvery glow of the crystal sphere. The key rested on the desk, its shifting symbols seeming to dance in response to the sphere's light. The silver-bound book lay open beside it, the words "Face the shadow" etched across the page. Clara sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at the objects as if they held all the answers she needed. But the truth was, she wasn't sure what to do next. She picked up the key, feeling its strange warmth. Its intricate carvings hummed faintly under her fingertips. The shadow she had encountered in the woods haunted her thoughts. It wasn't just a figment of her imagination. It was connected to the golden door, and somehow, to her. As Clara pondered, the sphere pulsed brightly, drawing her attention. She leaned forward, her heart quickening. The light from the sphere expanded, filling the room, and for a moment the air seemed to hum with energy. The silver-bound book flipped open to a new page, the glowing symbols rearranging themselves into another view. It was the golden door, more vivid than ever. This time the key was fully inserted into its lock, and beneath the image, new words appeared. Turn the key. Clara swallowed hard. She placed the key in her lap and stared at the sphere. Is this it? She whispered. Am I ready? The sphere didn't respond, but its light softened, becoming more inviting. Clara glanced at the book again, then back at the sphere. She felt a strange pull, as though the golden door were calling her. Taking a deep breath, Clara placed the sphere in front of her, held the key tightly, and closed her eyes. Okay, she said softly, let's do this. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in the dream realm. The air shimmered with golden light, and the ground beneath her feet was soft and cloud-like. The golden door stood before her, glowing with a radiant warmth. This time the keyhole in its center sparkled, as if waiting for her. She stepped forward, her heart beat loud in her ears. As she approached the door, the familiar hum of energy filled the air, and the carvings on its surface seemed to ripple in anticipation. Clara reached out, her hand trembling, and slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The moment the key clicked into place, a low rumble echoed through the dream realm. The carvings on the door flared with light, shifting into new patterns that seemed to tell a story. Clara hesitated, her hand resting on the key. Turn it, came a voice behind her. Clara spun around to see Solina standing a few feet away, her silver cloak glowing softly in the golden light of the door. Her expression was calm, but serious. This is your choice, Selena said. Once the door is opened, there is no turning back. What lies beyond is the truth you seek, but it may not be the truth you expect. Clara's grip on the key tightened. What's behind it? The shadow? Selena nodded. The shadow is a part of you. Facing it will be your first step toward understanding the golden door and what it means. But be prepared. It may not reveal itself easily. Clara looked back at the door, her resolve hardening. I've come this far, she said. I have to know. With one last deep breath, she turned the key. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a swirling void of light and shadow. Clara stepped forward, her body tense with anticipation. The air was cold, and the faint hum of the sphere echoed all around her, growing louder with each step. As she crossed the threshold, the world shifted. The golden light of the door faded, replaced by a vast, dark expanse. Clara stood in the center of what felt like an endless void, the ground beneath her feet smooth and reflective like glass. Above her, faint stars blinked in and out of existence, casting a dim light. Then she saw it. The shadow emerged from the darkness, its form towering. This time it was clearer, its edges sharper. It no longer flickered like smoke, but moved with purpose, its dark tendrils writhing in the air. Clara's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. The shadow didn't speak, but its form began to change. Slowly it condensed, taking on a shape that mirrored Clara's own. Within moments, she found herself staring at a shadowy reflection of herself, its eyes glowing faintly. You are me, Clara whispered, realization dawning, a part of me. The shadow nodded, its movements deliberate and fluid. Clara felt a rush of emotions, fear, sadness, anger, all swirling within her. She took a step closer, her hands trembling. What are you? She asked again, her voice softer now. The shadow finally spoke, its voice low and resonant, like an echo from deep within her own mind. I am what you hide, it said, your fears, your doubts, the truths you do not wish to face. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The words hit her like a wave, forcing her to confront the parts of herself she had tried to ignore. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I want to understand. I want to move forward. The shadow extended its hand, palm open. Clara hesitated, but something deep inside her urged her to accept. Slowly she reached out and placed her hand in its hand. The moment their hands touched, the void around them filled with light. Memories, feelings, and thoughts flooded Clara's mind. Times she had doubted herself, moments of fear she had buried, and truths she had been too afraid to face. It was overwhelming, but beneath it all, she felt something else, a sense of release. As the light subsided, the shadow began to fade. Its form softened, merging with the air until it was gone. Clara stood alone in the void, but she no longer felt afraid. Instead, she felt whole. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in her attic room. A crystal sphere glowed softly on her desk, and the key rested beside it. The silver-bound book lay open, its pages filled with new symbols that seemed to pulse with life. Clara took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling steadily. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, she felt at peace with the uncertainty. The golden door had been a threshold, not just to another realm, but to a deeper understanding of herself. As she looked at the sphere, she smiled. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The quiet hum of the crystal sphere filled Clara's attic room, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. Clara sat at her desk, staring at the silver-bound book. The symbols on its pages shifted and pulsed as though alive, yet they made no immediate sense. She had faced the shadow, stepped through the golden door, and emerged with a newfound sense of self. But now the question lingered. What came next? The book offered no immediate answers. Instead, it displayed an intricate diagram, lines spiraling outward like threads of a web. At the center of the web was the golden door, now open with a soft light spilling from it. The surrounding threads were marked with symbols, each different, but all unfamiliar. Beneath the diagram, a single word glowed faintly. Paths. Paths, Clara whispered, tracing the lines on the page. So this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. The sphere pulsed gently as though encouraging her thoughts. Clara leaned back, gazing at the objects on her desk, the sphere, the key, and the book. They felt like pieces of a puzzle she was only starting to understand. The journey through the door had taught her one thing. Answers didn't come easily, and the path to truth was never straightforward. The silver-bound book shifted again, revealing another image, a compass, its needle spinning wildly before settling on a direction. Below the compass were the words, "Choose your thread." Clara frowned. Choose my thread? What does that mean? The room grew warmer and the sphere's light brightened, casting faint patterns on the wall. Clara closed her eyes, focusing on the hum of the sphere. She let her thoughts drift, hoping for guidance. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in the dream realm. This time the landscape was different. She stood in a vast open field under a twilight sky, the stars above twinkling faintly. Around her, the threads from the book's diagram materialized, glowing faintly in the dim light. Each thread extended in a different direction, like roads waiting to be traveled. At the center of the field stood Selena, her silver cloak glowing faintly in the twilight. In her hands, as she held the crystal-topped staff, its light illuminating the threads. "You have arrived," Selena said, her voice gentle but firm. "The door you opened was a gateway, but now you must choose which path to follow." Clara stepped closer, her eyes scanning the threads. Each one shimmered with a different hue, gold, blue, emerald green, deep violet, and pulsed faintly as though alive. "What do they mean?" she asked. "Each thread is a journey," Selena explained, "a piece of the truth you seek. They represent different aspects of your dreams, your past, and your future. Some will reveal clarity, others may challenge you. The path you choose now will shape what lies ahead." Clara hesitated, her gaze shifting between the glowing threads. They all seemed to pull at her, each one beckoning with an unseen force. "What happens if I choose wrong?" she asked. Selena smiled softly. "There are no wrong choices, only different lessons. The path you choose will reveal what you are ready to face. In time you may walk them all, but for now, trust your heart." Clara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of flowers. She tried to quiet her mind, focusing on the pull she felt in her chest. One thread stood out, its glow a deep, calming blue. Without fully understanding why, Clara reached for it. As her fingers brushed the thread, the world around her shifted. The field in Selena faded, replaced by a winding path that stretched into the distance. The air here was cool and damp, the sound of flowing water echoing faintly in the distance. Clara walked down the path, her steps careful but steady. The blue thread shimmered faintly ahead of her, guiding her like a beacon. The landscape around her was serene, a forest of tall, silvery trees with glowing leaves, their light casting soft shadows on the ground. The sound of water grew louder as she walked, and soon she came to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a pool of water, its surface perfectly still. The blue thread disappeared into its depths, rippling faintly as though beckoning her closer. Clara knelt by the edge of the pool, staring into its crystalline surface. She saw her reflection, but it wasn't her alone. Behind her reflection stood another figure, one she didn't recognize. It was a woman, her face kind but unfamiliar. Her eyes, however, were strikingly similar to Clara's, holding the small golden flecks that Clara often saw in her own. "Who are you?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. The woman in the reflection smiled faintly. "I am a part of you," she said, "a part you have forgotten." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Forgotten? What do you mean?" The reflection didn't answer directly. Instead, the woman reached out, her hand pressing gently against the surface of the water. The pool rippled and images began to form, fragments of memories Clara didn't recognize. A small child running through a field of flowers, a wooden cottage nestled deep in a forest, and a crystal pendant glowing faintly in the moonlight. "These are pieces of your story," the woman said, "pieces buried deep within your dreams. Follow the thread and you will remember." The images faded and Clara stared at her reflection, her mind racing. "But why did I forget?" she asked. "What happened to me?" The woman's expression softened. "The answers lie ahead. Trust the thread and it will guide you." Before Clara could respond, the reflection faded, leaving only her voice staring back at her. The blue thread pulsed faintly, disappearing into the water's depths. Clara stood, her hands trembling. She glanced back at the path she had traveled, then down at the pool. The choice was clear. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the water, its coolness wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. The blue thread glowed brighter, and the world around her dissolved into light. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back in her attic room. The sphere glowed faintly, and the silver-bound book lay open on her desk. This time, the pages displayed new images, memories from the pool, the wooden cottage, the crystal pendant, and the woman with gold-flecked eyes. Clara touched the page, her fingers brushing against the images. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and determination. The sphere pulsed gently as if to say, "Keep going." Clara smiled, her heart racing. The threads of her story were beginning to weave together, and she was ready to follow them, wherever they might lead. Clara's fingers hovered over the images on the page of the silver-bound book. The crystal-clear depiction of the wooden cottage nestled in the heart of a dense forest drew her attention. A faint mist surrounded it, and the golden flecks of light in its windows seemed alive. Below the image, a phrase shimmered faintly, rearranging itself as she watched. "The past whispers when you are ready to hear." Clara leaned back in her chair, staring at the phrase. "The past?" she murmured. "My past?" The book didn't respond, but the crystal sphere glowed faintly in agreement. She could feel the quiet pulse of its energy, almost like a heartbeat. Her gaze shifted to the blue thread in her mind. Even though it no longer physically appeared, she could sense its presence pulling her back to the pool, back to the cottage. Clara stood, pacing her small attic room, trying to decide what to do. The memories she had glimpsed felt distant but intimate, as though they belonged to her, yet remained hidden behind a curtain she couldn't fully part. Finally, she stopped pacing and placed both hands on the crystal sphere. "Show me," she whispered. The sphere responded instantly. Its silvery glow filled the room, and the air around her grew warmer. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pull as the world shifted. When she opened them again, she was standing on the winding path from before. The forest was alive with the sound of rustling leaves and distant birdsong. The blue thread reappeared before her, weaving gently through the trees like a guide. Clara followed it, her steps careful but eager. The memory of the cottage lingered in her mind, growing clearer with each step she took. After what felt like hours, Clara emerged from the trees into a clearing. There, nestled amidst wildflowers and moss-covered stones, was the wooden cottage from the book. Its weathered exterior exuded warmth, and smoke curled lazily from the stone chimney. Golden light spilled from its windows, illuminating the clearing with a soft, welcoming glow. Clara hesitated, her heart racing. The cottage felt so familiar, as if she had been there before. She stepped closer, the blue thread disappearing beneath the door. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open, revealing a cozy interior. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, jars of herbs, and odd trinkets. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. In the center of the cottage was a small wooden table, and on it rested a crystal pendant, the same one she had seen in the pool of water. Clara approached the table, her fingers brushing against the pendant's surface. It was cool to the touch, and as her hand closed around it, a sudden rush of energy surged through her. Images flooded her mind, snapshots of a life she couldn't fully remember. She saw a younger version of herself sitting at the very table where she now stood. A woman with golden flecked eyes sat across from her, smiling warmly. The woman's voice was soft and melodic as she spoke. "You carry more within you than you know, Clara. This pendant is a key to what you've forgotten. One day, when the time is right, you'll remember." The image shifted. Clara saw the same woman standing in the forest, holding the pendant up to the moonlight. Her voice echoed in the air. "This will protect you even if you lose your way. When you are ready, it will lead you back to the truth." The images dissolved, leaving Clara breathless. She opened her eyes, still clutching the pendant. Her heart was racing, but her mind felt clearer. The woman in the memories. She wasn't just a random figure. She was important, vital, a missing piece of Clara's puzzle. "Who are you?" Clara whispered aloud. "Why don't I remember you?" The pendant glowed faintly in her hand as though responding to her questions. Clara slipped it around her neck, the crystal resting just above her heart. The moment it touched her skin, the room seemed to hum with energy. Selina's voice broke the silence. "You have found the first piece." Clara spun around to see the Keeper of Dreams standing near the doorway. Her silver cloak shimmered in the firelight, and her expression was calm but serious. "Is she real?" Clara asked. "The woman in the memories. Was she part of my life?" "She was," Selina said gently, "but the memories you saw are only fragments. There's more to uncover, and the pendant will help you." Clara touched the crystal around her neck. "Why did I forget her? Why did I forget this place?" Selina stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Some truths are buried to protect us. You faced something long ago that left a scar on your soul. The shadow you confronted is tied to that past. But now you are strong enough to begin remembering." Clara nodded slowly, the weight of Selina's words settling over her. "What do I do now?" "Follow the pendant. It will guide you to the next thread. Each step you take will reveal more of the truth." Clara glanced down at the pendant, which glowed faintly against her skin. She felt its pull, subtle but steady, like a compass pointing toward the unknown. Back in her attic room, Clara sat at her desk, the pendant resting warmly against her skin. The silver-bound book now displayed a new page, its symbol shifting into an image of the forest and the cottage. Beneath it, a new phrase appeared. The echoes grow stronger. Listen. The sphere pulsed softly beside her, its glow steady and reassuring. Clara took a deep breath, her mind brimming with questions. She didn't know where the pendant would lead her next, but she was ready to follow its call. The threads of her past were beginning to unravel, and each step brought her closer to the truth. For the first time, Clara felt a sense of purpose, not just in understanding her dreams, but in reclaiming the pieces of herself that she had lost. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. The morning sun broke through Clara's attic window, scattering golden light across the room. She sat at her desk, the pendant warm against her chest. Its faint glow had grown stronger since she had placed it around her neck, and Clara could feel its subtle pull, like a whisper guiding her towards something she couldn't yet see. The crystal sphere and silver-bound book sat beside her, their quiet presence steadying her as she prepared for what was next. The book's pages displayed a single phrase that hadn't changed since last night. The echoes grow stronger. Listen. Clara touched the pendant, feeling its warmth radiate through her fingers. Listen, she murmured. But to what? The sphere pulsed softly, its silvery light growing brighter. Clara leaned forward, resting her hands on the desk. Okay, she whispered. Show me. The pendant grew warmer, and a soft hum filled the air. The sphere's glow expanded, wrapping Clara in light as the world around her began to shift. The familiar pull of the dream realm overtook her, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a new place. Clara was surrounded by an endless expanse of stars, their light shimmering against a velvety black sky. Beneath her feet was a translucent platform, glowing faintly with a silvery hue. The pendant at her chest pulsed in time with the stars, its glow growing stronger with each beat. Where am I? She asked, her voice echoing into the vastness. You are within the echo chamber, came Selina's voice. Clara turned to see the Keeper of Dreams standing nearby, her silver cloak rippling as if caught in an unseen breeze. Her staff glowed softly, its light blending with the stars. The echo chamber, Clara asked, her brows furrowing. What is this place? It is a space where the past and present intertwine, Selina said. Here you can hear the echoes of what has been hidden. Memories, truths, and even voices long forgotten. The pendant has brought you here because you are ready to listen. Clara touched the pendant again, feeling its hum intensify. What am I supposed to hear? Close your eyes, Selina instructed. Let the pendant guide you. Clara hesitated for a moment, then obeyed. She closed her eyes and focused on the warmth of the pendant. The hum grew louder, resonating through her chest. Slowly, faint whispers began to fill the air, overlapping like the murmur of a distant crowd. She couldn't make out the words, but the sound was oddly comforting. One voice emerged from the rest, clear and familiar. Clara. Her eyes flew open and her heart skipped a beat. The voice was soft, the same voice she had heard in the memories at the cottage. It's her, Clara whispered, the woman from the memories. Selina nodded. Listen closely. She is reaching out to you. Clara closed her eyes again, focusing on the voice. This time the words became clearer. Clara, you found the pendant. Good. I knew you would. The voice was warm, filled with a quiet strength. You may not remember me yet, but I have always been with you. The path you are on is one I once walked myself. The pendant is our connection, a thread between us. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Who are you? She asked aloud. Why don't I remember you? The voice paused as if considering her question. You don't remember because you weren't ready. The memories were locked away to protect you. But now the locks are beginning to break. The answers you seek are within you, Clara. Follow the pendant, trust the sphere. They will guide you to me. Clara's hands tightened around the pendant. Where are you? She asked. How can I find you? The voice grew softer, almost a whisper. The next thread, the forest of mirrors. You'll find me there. The hum of the pendant faded, and the whispers around her dissolved into silence. Clara opened her eyes, her heart pounding. The stars above her seemed to glow brighter, their light reflecting in Solina's calm gaze. Back in her attic room, Clara stared at the pendant, her thoughts racing. The woman in the memories wasn't just a part of her past. She was alive, somewhere, waiting for Clara to find her. The mention of the Forest of Mirrors sent a chill down her spine. The name felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. The silver-bound book shifted on her desk, its pages flipping open to a new diagram. This one showed a winding forest path lined with tall, reflective trees. At the end of the path was a glowing orb, pulsing faintly like the pendant. Beneath the image were the words, "The forest reveals the truth. The mirror reflects the soul." Clara ran her fingers over the page, feeling a sense of urgency. She didn't know what the Forest of Mirrors held, but she knew she had to go there. The pendant around her neck pulsed softly, as if encouraging her to take the next step. She turned to the crystal sphere, its glow steady and reassuring. "You're coming with me," she said, slipping into her bag alongside the silver-bound book. With the pendant's faint warmth as her guide and the sphere's light in her heart, Clara set off once more. The Forest of Mirrors awaited, and with it the answers she had been seeking. The threads of her story were coming together, and she was ready to uncover the truth, no matter what it revealed. The moon hung low in the sky as Clara stepped into the woods, the pendant glowing faintly against her chest. The forest was alive with the soft sounds of rustling leaves and distant echoing calls. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that seemed to press against her skin. The silver-bound book, tucked securely in her bag, had shown her the path, a forest where the trees reflected her soul. She paused, gripping the crystal sphere tightly in one hand. Its steady glow illuminated the winding trail before her, casting eerie shadows across the ground. "The Forest of Mirrors," Clara murmured to herself, stepping deeper into the trees. "What does it mean to reflect the soul?" The pendant pulsed, its warmth spreading through her chest like a reassuring touch. Clara's footsteps quickened as the path narrowed, the trees growing denser around her. Their bark shimmered faintly, catching the light of the sphere, and soon Clara realized why the forest had its name. Each tree held a reflective surface. Some were smooth and glass-like, others rippled like water, distorting the reflections they captured. Clara paused before one, her own image staring back at her from the polished bark. But it wasn't quite her. The reflection's eyes glimmered with faint golden flecks, and her expression was calm, serene, unlike Clara's own nervous face. "What are you trying to show me?" Clara whispered, pressing her fingers to the tree's surface. The bark was cool, and the reflection shimmered in response as if alive. The golden flecks in the reflection's eyes grew brighter, and the image spoke, not aloud, but in Clara's mind. "Keep moving," it said, the voice soft but commanding. "The truth lies ahead." Clara pulled her hand back, startled. The sphere in her hand glowed brighter, as if urging her forward. She nodded and continued, her eyes scanning the reflective trees around her. Each one showed a different version of herself, some younger, some older, and some unrecognizable. As Clara ventured deeper into the forest, the path grew more complex. The reflective trees loomed closer, their distorted images shifting with every step she took. The pendant pulsed steadily, guiding her, and the sphere's glow lit the way. Finally, she came to a clearing. At its center stood a massive tree, its trunk wide and smooth like a perfect mirror. Unlike the other trees, its surface reflected nothing. It was an empty void, absorbing the light around it. The blue thread reappeared, winding its way to the base of the tree and disappearing into its depths. Clara approached cautiously, her steps slow and deliberate. The pendant grew warmer, and the hum of the sphere became louder, filling the clearing with a gentle resonance. As she neared the tree, the void began to shift. Slowly, a figure emerged in its surface, a woman with golden-flecked eyes and a warm, knowing smile. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "It's you," she said, her voice trembling. The woman nodded, her expression kind but serious. "Clara," she said, her voice echoing softly in the air. "You've come so far." "Who are you?" Clara asked, stepping closer. "Why don't I remember you?" The woman's reflection shimmered, her image growing clearer. "I am a part of you," she said, "a part you've forgotten, but I am also more than that. I am the guide you've always carried within, the voice that whispers when you are lost." Clara frowned, her mind racing. "You're part of me?" The woman nodded, and yet separate. The connection between us runs deeper than memory. You've been seeking answers, but the truth isn't something I can give you. It's something you must uncover yourself. Clara glanced down at the pendant, which pulsed in time with the woman's words. "But why don't I remember you?" she asked again, her voice rising. "Why was all of this locked away from me?" The reflection softened, her golden eyes filled with understanding. "Because you weren't ready. There are truths within you that have been hidden for your protection. The shadow you faced was the first of many barriers. As you move forward, the pieces of your story will come together, but you must be patient." Clara felt frustration bubbling within her. "I've been patient," she said, her voice shaking. "I've followed the threads, faced the shadow. What am I missing?" The woman's reflection tilted her head, a faint smile on her lips. "You are not missing anything, Clara. You are exactly where you need to be. But the next step is not about seeking answers. It's about embracing what you find." The reflection began to ripple, and Clara felt a sudden pull, as if the tree itself were drawing her closer. The void shimmered, and the reflection's voice softened. "Step into the mirror, Clara," the woman said. "It will show you what you need to see." Clara hesitated, fear creeping into her chest. The mirror tree loomed before her, its surface dark and infinite. But the pendant's warmth steadied her, and the sphere's light seemed to wrap around her like a shield. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped forward. The moment her hand touched the surface of the tree, the void enveloped her, and the world dissolved into light. Clara found herself standing in a room that felt eerily familiar. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their spines covered in the same shifting symbols as the silver-bound book. A table sat in the center of the room, and on it rested a crystal pendant identical to the one she wore. The air hummed with energy, and Clara realized she wasn't alone. The woman with golden-flecked eyes stood on the other side of the table, her presence warm and steady. "This is where it begins," the woman said, "and where it ends, but only if you're ready." Clara stepped closer, her pulse racing. "Ready for what?" The woman's smile deepened. "To remember." Before Clara could respond, the room filled with light, and memories surged into her mind. Fragments of a life she had forgotten, moments of joy and sorrow, and a connection to the woman before her that defied explanation. When the light faded, Clara fell to her knees, her chest heaving. The pendant around her neck glowed brightly, its warmth steady and reassuring. "I remember," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I remember you." The woman knelt beside her, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. "And now," she said softly, "you are ready for the truth." The glow of the pendant pulsed rhythmically against Clara's chest as she stood in the luminous room. The woman with golden-flecked eyes, The guide she now remembered remained by her side. The rush of memories had left Clara trembling but resolved. She could feel the weight of truth, heavy yet fraying, hanging in the air. "What is the truth?" Clara asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "What is it that I'm meant to understand?" The woman smiled, her expression soft yet tinged with sadness. "The truth is not something I can give you, Clara. It has always been within you. My role has been to guide you to this moment, to the place where you can finally see it for yourself." The crystal pendant around Clara's neck grew warmer, its light brightening. The air shimmered and the bookshelves lining the room began to dissolve, revealing an infinite expanse of stars. Clara stepped forward, her feet moving instinctively towards the center of the space. There, hovering in the void, was the golden door, open and glowing just as it had been when she first stepped through it. But now it revealed something new. Beyond the doorway was a radiant figure, Clara herself, but different. This version of her radiated a quiet strength, her golden-flecked eyes glowing with wisdom and peace. Clara froze, staring at her reflection across the threshold. "Is that me?" she whispered. The woman nodded. "That is you, your truest self, unburdened by fear and doubt. The shadow you faced, the memories you unlocked, and the path you followed were all leading you to this moment, to this realization." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. "But why was I broken in the first place? Why did I lose myself?" The woman stepped closer, her golden eyes meeting Clara's. "You were never broken, Clara. You were protecting yourself. Long ago you faced a loss so great that your heart couldn't bear it. The pain, the questions, they became the shadow you carried. To survive, you buried the truth and locked it away, hoping one day you'd be strong enough to face it." The pendant pulsed against Clara's chest, and the memories began to surface, clearer now than ever. She saw a younger version of herself, standing in the same room, her eyes filled with tears as the woman with golden-flecked eyes handed her the pendant. "You made the choice," the woman in the memory said, "to forget, to protect yourself. But when the time comes, the pendant will lead you back. It will guide you to who you're meant to be." The memory faded, leaving Clara breathless. "I chose to forget," she whispered. "I did this to myself." The woman nodded gently. "And you also chose to remember. Every step you've taken has been an act of courage, Clara. You faced your fears, embraced the unknown, and reclaimed the pieces of yourself that you thought were lost." Clara turned back to the golden door and the radiant figure beyond it. Her reflection smiled, extending a hand toward her. The light around the figure pulsed with warmth, filling Clara with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "What happens if I step through?" Clara asked. "You become whole," the woman said simply. "You leave behind the fear, the doubt, the pain. You embrace the truth of who you are." Clara hesitated, her heart racing. The journey had been long and fraught with uncertainty, but now, standing at the threshold, she felt ready. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and crossed the golden door. The moment she stepped through, the light engulfed her. Clara felt a rush of energy, like every piece of herself was being stitched back together. The memories, the dreams, the shadows, all of it merged into a single clear truth. She was not broken. She was whole. When the light faded, Clara found herself standing in her attic room. The pendant still rested warmly against her chest, but its glow had softened. The crystal sphere sat quietly on her desk, its light steady and reassuring. The silver-bound book lay open to its final page, displaying a single glowing word: complete. Clara exhaled slowly, her hands trembling as she touched the pendant. She didn't need the sphere or the book to guide her anymore. The answer she had sought had always been within her. The woman with the golden-flecked eyes was not gone. She was part of Clara, a reflection of her truest self. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Clara felt at peace. She walked to the window and looked out at the forest, the morning sun breaking through the trees. The journey wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she could face it. Clara turned back to the sphere and the book, smiling softly. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." The sphere pulsed gently, as if in response, and Clara knew it would always be there, a quiet reminder of the path she had traveled and the truth she had found. Her dreams had led her to herself, and now the world awaited.